I spent another few hours up with Danny, the doctor, Emily, Al, working over my game plan for how to take out the Angel of Death. The gap in its defenses was small, but I was gonna have to use it. It was basically all I had to work with. Right now, it was nothing more than a pinhole. In order to make it work, I was gonna have to tear really hard at it. Turn that tiny pinhole into a massive crevice. The key was in that gap in defenses. I had to widen it, make it something that I could truly take advantage of. The overall plan was to take its ability to shift between its offensive capabilities and its defensive capabilities. That shield was a major problem. Its overall strength was just too high. The only way I was going to be able to make a solid dent was if it wasn't there. But the only time it wasn't there was when it activated its heavy weaponry. Both the front-mounted plasma assault rifles and the rear-mounted laser can all be fired without terminating the shield. My access point, my only access point, was going to be the heavy cannon up top. I had to get it to use that cannon without getting blown away by it. And then, beyond that, find a way to lock it. The shield can't come back up as long as that main cannon is online. As long as it's projected out, the shields are down. So I had to find a way to lock it out. And that was the primary problem. But after I gave him the game plan, Danny came up with an interesting idea. Effectively, it might work, but this was new stuff. It wasn't included in my basic weaponry. Danny was gonna have to make improvisations. Improvising was an important skill, but Danny didn't have much time to work with. So, if this was going to work at all, then I'd only get one shot at it. If I miss, it's game over. The power armor goes back up, with no way to lock the weapon into position, keep it from reactivating. In other words, I'm screwed. Danny spent most of the night up, tinkering away, and managed to put together a very special device. He had to go into town in order to pick up the necessary ingredients. This wasn't his normal weapon. Essentially, he had to take apart one of the smart bombs that we made, the magnetic little robots that we could remote control after attaching to vehicles, and make enough room to include a very special payload, a highly condensed mixture of chemicals that would be set off when the device went off, mixing together in the blast. He of course had to take the blast yield way down. Heck, he even had to thin out the exterior of the device, make it paper thin, so that the blast would breach it. Once the chemicals interacted, they would essentially form a solid substrate, like a quick-forming concrete or metal that would rapidly harden after the chemicals were mixed together. Essentially, a goop that hardens into something like stone or steel. Basically, once it went off, anything that it went off on would essentially be wrapped in an exceptionally hard material, locked in place. If I could get that to go off on that primary cannon, I could lock it in place, make sure it can't retract back into the vehicle, and in doing so, keep it from reactivating the armor. The weapon itself might still be functional, but it wouldn't be able to swivel or pivot. It would have a locked angle of fire, not be able to attack in any other direction, meaning its biggest gun would lose basically 95% of its functionality, while it lost its most valuable defensive ability. Even in terms of defense, the power of its shield was more than 10 times that of my own. Unbreakable doesn't even begin to cover it, which is why I needed to take it offline. The only question was, could I do it? No, that's not really a question at all. If I didn't do it, then I was a dead man. Finally, we all laid down to get some rest. Being completely wiped out wasn't going to be good if we needed to actually win the race. Dealing with the Angel of Death was only the first task on the list. Even if I was able to knock it out, I still had the rest of the race to run. This was just one very big hurdle in it. We awoke the next day, a little later than most of the other teams, actually. After all, we did have to spend a lot of time working on our strategy. Of course, all of the other racers who were put on the Angels list dropped out. Every single one of them. It happens every year. They release the primary list and everyone on it drops out. So there's always a backup list. A secondary list of names that gets revealed right as the race starts. To be honest, I think I'm the first person in a very long time to decide not to back out after being placed on the list. As we got everything ready and began moving Titan into position, the entire place was a shambles. The sound of hundreds of engines running as everyone made their way to the starting line, finishing off whatever last-minute adjustments they could, trying to hedge bets in their favor, cutting last-minute deals if they could, making arrangements to try to up their odds. As I took my place on the starting line, I noticed the vehicle beside me looking at me quite intently. By the looks on their faces, they were astonished that I stuck around. They were a bunch of degenerates, obviously. One of them, a guy with a shaved head and lots of piercings and tattoos all over his dome, stuck his head outside of the car that he was sitting in. "You must be crazy. You know, I was a bit worried when I found out that I was beside you in the list, that I'd be right next to you in the lineup when the race started. I mean, seriously, a CAD 5? But then I saw you got put on the Angels list and I thought you'd be out of here. But you must really be stupid. To be honest, I can't wait to see the Angel blow you to pieces. I can tell by the look of you that you're a rich prick. Bought your way into the race with a fancy ride, and you're actually stupid enough to stick it around after finding out who's gunning for you. It's gonna be my genuine pleasure to see the broken pieces that are left," he said, laughing as he stuck his head back in the vehicle. I just ignored him. "Hey, Emily," I said, knowing that of course they're all able to hear me, wired into communications. As I stuck on my helmet, "The car beside me, can you mark it for me? I want to know where this guy is." Sure," Emily replied. "I mean, don't you think that's a bit of a waste of time? I mean, you do have more important things to deal with. And according to the information, that guy's basically no one. You're only allowed to tag 10 racers at any given time. Don't you think you should save that for someone more important?" "Emily, sometimes the little things matter. At this point, I've got so much of a bounty on my head that tagging any specific racers is, well, it's next to a waste of time. Basically, everyone's going to be gunning for me. Well, that's if I can survive the Angel of Death. Until I get finished with him, everyone else will most likely stay clear. They don't want to get caught in the crossfire. Plus, everyone knows that if you take out someone on the Angels list, you take their place. So until such time as the Angel is eliminated from the game, they won't touch me, which is all fine and good with me, because I have no intentions of going down. So, it's about time that we got this little race started.